Why do the rich keep on getting richer and the rest of us keep falling behind? One reason is because governments in Ottawa have been working for them, not us. Whether it's conservatives or Justin Trudeau's liberals, they're giving the people at the top whatever they want and we're paying the price. It's why we don't all have prescription drug coverage, because big drug companies don't want it. It's why we get gouged by cell phone companies. And it's why big polluters have been let off the hook. Imagine, instead, a government in Ottawa that actually works for you. The NDP's New Deal for People will tackle the healthcare crisis, starting with pharmacare for all and expanding to dental care. Make life more affordable with 500,000 new homes and lower cell phone and internet bills. And fight the climate crisis by creating new jobs and making big polluters pay. And we can do it when the richest people and the richest corporations pay their fair share. That's my commitment to you.
So there we have it, folks. A New Deal for People, the NDP. It's the first party to release a platform, and it's a good one. Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. If you saw that opening clip, Jagmeet Singh talking about a new deal for Canadians. Not just a Green New Deal, that's certainly part of it. We saw that a couple weeks ago. But a new deal broadly defined. It's something special. It's a challenge to the neoliberal status quo. It's a challenge to the inequality and injustice that's been building and building in our society since the 1990s, if not the 1980s. It is a transformational platform that will challenge not only, the status quo of the liberal and conservative parties, but even to a certain degree challenge the sort of timidity that's plagued the NDP for too long. This is a bold platform. Over the coming weeks and months, the NDP is going to give more details on this. And, as somebody who covers left politics, I'm going to do that as well. But the reality here is there's a lot to chew on. I really want to focus on a few things that I think are extremely important. One is that this is a new deal for everybody. The problem with the first New Deal historically, it was great. It was a transformative policy in America. It was probably one of the greatest policies thought of in American history to that day. But it was very, very unequal. Didn't apply nearly fairly enough to Indigenous people and Black people and Hispanic people as it did to white Americans. Now, it didn't offer no help to those groups. There have been some studies that have shown that, however unequal, there were some benefits to, say, African American populations with the FDR New Deal, but it didn't address racial inequality. Jagmeet Singh's New Deal for People. New Deal for People, the NDP, if you will, if you make it an acronym. It puts racial justice, reconciliation at the core. It's going to fight things like carding. The process by which police stop people and ask for their, identification, supposedly randomly, of course. But as we know, if you're young, if you're racialized, if you're male, you're much more likely to be carded. And so, it's not a random process at all. And, there are certain neighborhoods in Toronto where, a young Black man will be carded, multiple times a year, where, of course, someone like myself has never been carded in his life and probably never will, if I'm being honest. And reconciliation being at its core, reconciliation with Indigenous people, a recognition, frankly, that Canada's treatment of Indigenous people has been genocidal in its effect. And for much of our history, genocidal in its intent. We have to change that. And so Jagmeet Singh's not just going to work on behalf of Indigenous people. He's going to work with Indigenous people. He's going to fight alongside Indigenous people for the justice that they deserve and need and want. Ending things like the Grassy Narrow mercury poisoning. While Justin Trudeau said, "Thanks for your donation" to those who protested that, Jagmeet says, we're going to find a solution. Not just the government paternalistically doing things for Indigenous people, but building an alliance between the federal government and the Indigenous people, the Indigenous nations, the Indigenous communities, to solve the issues that plague them and to solve them in a manner that's consistent with their values and their traditions and their knowledge. Vitally important. A lot of this stuff hasn't been done by Justin Trudeau. He promised reconciliation, but of course, as we've seen, he's fought it. He's done nothing for the people of Grassy Narrows. Indigenous kids were promised equal educational funding, but not only has Justin Trudeau failed to deliver that equality, he's actually been resisting it through the courts. You know, if you want to read more about that, I mean, the expert on something like that would be Charlie Angus. He's done incredible amounts of work fighting for educational justice for Indigenous children, especially in the North, where it's, you know, the lack of educational equality is especially evident. Another factor here is it's going to make Tommy Douglas's Medicare dream real. Tommy Douglas helped build Canadian Medicare. He introduced it at the provincial level. And while, yes, it did happen under Pearson's government federally in the 1960s, I think the reason it happened, this is my interpretation, is because it was an NDP minority government. It was a liberal government with minority support from the NDP. And so the NDP played a crucial role in the introduction of Medicare provincially to legitimize it and in its expansion to the federal level. But as we know, our Medicare has a lot of holes. Doesn't cover your teeth. Doesn't cover your pills. Doesn't really cover mental health. Doesn't really cover your eyes. Doesn't cover a whole lot of you, if I'm being honest. Our Medicare system's great. Don't get me wrong. I like the fact that you can get care and not have to worry about pulling out, you know, your credit card or debit card or cash when you need it. But it doesn't make sense that tooth, that, you know, infection that turns into an abscess, that leads you to the ER, that the dentist at some point couldn't have taken care of that for free. Or that your local family physician, who is covered, gives you a prescription that you need to get better or stay healthy, and that's not covered. Doesn't make any sense. Not in my view. And so Jagmeet Singh is committed to a head-to-toe Medicare plan. It will cover all of those things. It'll cover the existing things we cover, plus health, or plus dental, pharmaceuticals, vision, the mental health. It'll cover a broad spectrum of what it means. And in so doing, it'll build Tommy Douglas's dream. Because the reality is that you're not really covered if so many of the things you need aren't covered. Right? You know what I mean? You're not. You're not covered if your teeth aren't covered. You're not covered if your eyes aren't covered. You're not covered if your mental health isn't addressed. And so not only is this essential to human dignity, because I think Canadians understand that if you can't pay for your health care and you suffer because of it, that is an affront to your dignity. And so we recognize that these issues are also related to human dignity, but it's also going to have positive health effects. Because when you talk about vision care and pharmaceutical care and dental care, often these things are preventative in nature. Good dental care is more preventative than anything. You know, good dental hygienic work, and then maybe you have small cavities that require a little bit of work. Those are relatively minor. Everyone kind of gets cavities now and then, right? You eat a little bit too much candy, you don't floss enough, you know, etc. Everyone needs dental cleanings every 6 months. Helps keep your teeth clean. Way more cheaper than ending up in the, you know, hospital because your tooth infection, you know, got really serious and led to multiple complications. You know, pharmaceutical care. Small amounts of medication can keep you out of the hospital, can keep you more productive and happier and safer. Way more effective than letting minor health concerns become rampant because people didn't get the medication they need. So I'm excited for that. That's something that the NDP often pulls very well on, credibility on healthcare issues, and as such, I think Jagmeet Singh is a real policy winner here. Canadians will get it. Canadians will understand it. They'll see the value. Another factor here, it ties into the Green New Deal. I won't go into it too much, but Jagmeet has said that, look, we need to transform our economy. But in so doing, it has to include everyone. It has to include communities across the country, and it has to include working people. And so he's committed to a giant infrastructure program, much like Andrea Horwath mentioned at the provincial level, he'll do at the federal level, which will transform the Canadian economy without leaving working class people behind. It's going to tear down that wall that's divided the economy and the environment, saying it's not jobs or the environment, It's jobs and the environment. And that's the NDP mission here. And I think just to close up, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. We really could. But I want to underline that I'll be going over this, increasingly over the coming weeks and months. Maybe I'll do a series of videos where I explore, video by video, the specific policies. But again, I've noted this in a lot of my videos, especially my video where I talked about the need to tax the rich. How the NDP, in a way the Liberals and Conservatives never face, they face the question, how are you going to pay for it? Conservatives, they almost never face this when they offer their tax cuts. They say, how are you going to pay for these tax cuts? What are you going to cut to cover the cost of these cuts? They don't face those questions, at least not consistently. And the Liberals might get a little bit more questions about their spending, but not in any kind of major sense. Not in the sense that the NDP does, right? So the NDP's always asked that question. How are you going to pay for it? And Jagmeet Singh has the answer. We're going to tax the rich. That's what we're going to do. That's what I've mentioned in my videos, that taxing the rich is popular. It's popular with Canadians of all backgrounds. It's popular with men and women. It's popular with young Canadians and old Canadians. In some cases, pretty surprisingly, older Canadians like taxing the rich even a little bit more than young people. And crucially, as we saw in some of that polling that I covered in a video a couple weeks ago, even people who say they're going to vote conservative or say they are conservatives support taxing the rich, support a wealth tax. That's incredibly special, I think, because you want a policy that comes from the NDP history, that comes from the NDP ideology, yet conservatives love. That's a winner, in my view, and wealth tax is the winner. And so that's what Jagmeet Singh has said. I'm going to tax the rich. He's going to raise income taxes on those who make more than a couple $100,000 a year. But that's a pretty standard one. We see that all the time. Even Justin Trudeau had a small tax increase on upper incomes. That's not necessarily a radical policy. But Jagmeet Singh has two, killer policies here that are going to transform the way Canadians tax the rich. The first is a capital gains levy increase. That means that whereas now, if you make $100,000 on capital gains, it's only taxed at half the rate that income of $100,000 is taxed. Jagmeet's going to raise that from 50 to 75%. It's not to the buck is a buck that I think a lot of us on the left want. We don't think that income made through investment should be taxed less than income made through labor. But this increase is a substantive one, and it will overwhelmingly affect wealthy people. Because wealthy people, the wealthiest people, they don't make most of their money through income. They don't make it through a paycheck. They make it through investments, flipping properties, selling stock, getting dividends, and so on and so on and so on. Taxing them on capital gains is a way to raise revenue and affect income inequality. But the big announcement today, because Jagmeet had already mentioned that, the big announcement today was the imposition of a 1% wealth tax on all those with more than $20 million of wealth. Now, for those who are, confused, a wealth tax and an income tax are different. An income tax is sort of applied to, in the tax year, how much did you earn, and we're going to tax you on a base percentage based on how much you earned based on the tax bracket. So, higher incomes will pay more, lower incomes will pay less, and it's based on the income in that year. But a wealth tax is different. It examines the total amount of wealth you have, not just cash, but holdings and stock and bonds and what have you, and says that if you have more than 20 million, the amount over 20 million, we're going to tax at a flat 1% rate. So if you have $50 million of wealth, on that last 30 million, we're going to tax it at 1%. And that's going to happen every year. You're going to have a 1% wealth tax. And of course, it's only going to affect the very rich, the people with more than $20 million. But it's going to be a substantive increase to the tax base. And it's a strike towards income equality. Because if we recognize that the system is broken and has been broken for a long time, it's not enough to just tax the rich going forward. It's not enough to increase capital gains and increase income tax. Because the rich have for too long benefited from a broken system. I've talked about this, right? And so a wealth tax sort of recognizes this and says, hey, The people who have benefited from this broken system for so long and have benefited so much that they don't just have, a lot of money, but an obscene amount of money, they're going to pay a wealth tax. And there can be debates. Should the wealth tax be 2%? Should the wealth tax have started at 50 million? That's what, Elizabeth Warren has proposed. 2%, but starting at 50. Jagmeet says only 1%, but starting at 20, which is going to cover a lot more people because there's not a lot of people who make over $50 million or who have over $50 million in Canada. Some people said, well, I don't start it at 5 or 10 million. These are debates we can have. But I think the balance is good. This new deal for the Canadian people is a good one. It's a democratic socialist vision for Canada. And you can't argue anymore that this NDP under Jagmeet Singh is timid or that it doesn't get left energy. This is a special platform. And I am excited to talk about it in detail over the coming weeks and months with you guys on this YouTube channel. And I'm maybe even more excited to talk about this over the coming weeks and months with voters as I support my local NDP candidate to try to get him elected, to send him to Parliament, to implement this platform. So guys, have a great one, and I'll see you next time.